Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. With that said, let's keep the conversation going. And I do want to switch gears to one of the crazier stories that I think I've really sort of ever seen, but I think it's also a microcosm of where we are in college sports in 2024, heading into 2025. Did you see this story that Florida State, it's always something with Florida State. I used to do when I used to write more, I used to have a saying, it's always something at Tennessee, because Tennessee, there was like a 7-8 year period where craziness was going on all the time. Well, it's always something at Florida State. They're back in court. This time, they're not suing the ACC. But Florida State, according to a report from Ross Dellinger at Yahoo Sports on Monday morning, Florida State is being sued. Now, I take that back. Leonard Hamilton, the head coach of Florida State, is being sued by 6 former players. This is a wild story. It is over unpaid NIL money. So let's go ahead and dive in, because it speaks to the craziness of college sports, the craziness of college sports in 2024. And we got to dive into this one because I find it fascinating. So listen, I could beat around the bush and try to give you a million little notes on this story. I think the easiest way to break it down, I'm just going to read straight from Ross Dellinger's report. Ross is great at what he does. He's actually been on this show as a guest once before. He was awesome. And he is, he's a great college sports insider. He does all these deep dive investigative reports. And he put out a report Monday, essentially, that Leonard Hamilton, the Florida State basketball coach, is being sued by 6 former players, all on last year's team, over unpaid NIL, and that the team actually boycotted a practice and had to be talked out of boycotting the Duke game on February 17th. Can you imagine if they just didn't show up for the Duke game, national TV, and the game just doesn't get played over unpaid NIL? Well, that's where we are. I'm just going to read to you directly from the Ross Dellinger report. It is a long piece, so I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs here. All right, this is it. Here we go. 6 former Florida State players filed a lawsuit Monday against their former coach, Leonard Hamilton, over unpaid promises of NIL compensation that total more than $1.5 million, and acknowledged within documents that they boycotted a practice last year over missed payments. It continues. The 6 plaintiffs, Darren Green, Josh Nickelberry, Primo Spears, Cameron Fletcher, Kentucky fans, you may remember that name, Deontay Green, and Jalen Worley, alleged that Hamilton promised each of them $250,000 in NIL payments from the coach's, quote, business partners. The players never received the payments, despite Hamilton promising the money to each member of the 23-24 team in 2 separate meetings, as well as in individual conversations with some players and their families. Several players transferred to Florida State under the assurance that they would receive the money. As evidence of NIL promises, the complaint includes multiple text message exchanges among players, between players and Hamilton, and between players and Will Cowan, an executive with one of Florida State's NIL collectives. It goes on. There's a bunch from the Will Cowan, who's part of the collective. I'll read part of a text from the piece. It says, quote, "This is from the NIL collective to players. I'm busting my butt every day for you guys. I'm meeting with the top donor in the entire booster organization Friday after trying to get us a little bit more each day. Crossing my fingers that I can shake loose at least 10 for you," Cowan said, presuming that means $10,000. And so again, this is a very long report, but I think it is worth reading from your time. And I think it is also worth having a deeper conversation about the state of NIL in college sports in 2024. And I think that's what I want to go ahead and do now. Listen, we can talk about all the different variables, but to me, what this speaks to, and I think everybody knows where I'm going, it speaks to just how crazy NIL is in 2024 in college sports heading into 2025. And a couple things stand out when I read this report, okay? The first thing that stands out, it's craziness, but it's not just always player driven, right? Because I think the players in some cases get a little bit of a bad rap, right? You hear all these stories. Oh, it's unregulated free agency. It's unregulated transfers. It's a situation where the players can just leave anytime they want. There's no contract. A player can, agree to a deal with a certain school and then a day later agree to a different deal. There's no nothing. There's no regulation. What I think this also shows, it's kind of crazy from the coaching and administrative side as well. You wouldn't believe, like you see these numbers in the portal. There's 10,000 players or whatever the number is. There's, I think, well over 2,000 players in the football transfer portal. I think basketball got to about 1,500 last year. And I think the assumption is always all 1,500 players in the basketball portal or all 2,000 in the football portal, whatever it is. Well, they're all just basically trying to get more money from somewhere else. That's certainly the case for a lot of them. But for a lot of them, they're at a place where they didn't get paid. They're at a place, obviously there's playing time stuff, this and that, but they're at a place that they didn't get paid. The coach forces them out. I was told of a major program, like I'm talking about a team that was in the college football playoff, right now. I'm one of the 12 teams in the college football playoff. And basically, after the playoff, they have to go ahead and cut guys from their team. Basically, they have to send 10, 15 guys in the portal because they're like, we have made certain commitments to certain guys. You're not good enough. You're not living up to your end of the bargain. We don't care if you want to stay or not. You got to go. So first off, what this says to me, it is chaotic, but it is chaotic on both sides of the argument. It is chaotic on both sides of the spectrum. Yes, the players deserve their fair share of blame. Yes, unregulated free agency every single year is not a great thing, but part of it is on the administrative side as well. Part of it is the administrations are struggling to raise the money that's promised in the offseason. Listen, again, I won't give specifics, but I was talking to a different person who runs a collective, and that person basically told me every single, January 1, February 1, October 1, whatever, I wake up trying to figure out how am I going to raise money to pay these bills by the end of the month. And, this person told me, again, it's a source, it's anonymous, whatever, but basically told me hey, we always find a way. We always get the job done. We've never missed a payment. We're proud of it, this and that. Who knows the truth? But this is something that's going on everywhere, okay? There isn't a school in America that feels great about where NIL is and that they have enough money. I'm telling you, man. I mean, look at the whole situation at Ohio State. This was a few weeks ago. We were talking about they can't fire Ryan Day because they got to pay the players $20 million next. The roster was $20 million this year. They're going to have to pay through the school next year. And so they can't afford to fire Ryan Day, even if they wanted to. Where are they going to come up with $38 million for his buyout on top of paying the players? So a lot of these schools just simply don't have money. Florida State, it's worth noting, Mike Norvell took a major haircut in large part because basically they weren't going to be able to raise the money to pay their players this year if he wants a competitive roster. And so Mike Norvell was basically, I'm going to give up millions of my salary because if I don't, I'm getting fired after this year. So that's one. Two, couple other thoughts on this story. And this is talked about a lot in the story is basically these players are learning the hard way, man. And this is something I think every person on this planet learns at some point in their lives. A handshake agreement, a verbal agreement is not legally binding. And this is something I continue to be amazed by in this NIL world is the number of guys who either have bad agents, don't have agents at all, and think that a verbal agreement is an agreement. To me, listen, we said it earlier. If you want to advertise on the pod, shoot me an email, AaronTorresPodcastQuestions@gmail.com. But whether you want to advertise $1,000 or $100,000, we're getting it in writing to protect both of us, right? And so to me, I understand there are legally limitations on what can be put in writing with these quote unquote NIL contracts, but you got to get something in writing. Players can do that even under the current NCAA guidelines. And I think what it speaks to is if you're a young man, if you're a parent, by the way, we have parents all over the country that watch this show that love college sports, make sure everything's in writing because if it isn't, it doesn't matter what the coach promised you. It doesn't matter what the coach agreed to you. By the way, I found it interesting. There's no text proof. Leonard Hamilton did not have any digital proof. Basically, let me even backtrack. Leonard Hamilton, there is no text message or email of him making these promises. My man is an OG. My man's been doing it a long time, and he basically did not put in writing anywhere, I owe you this much, I think, to protect himself. But that is where lawyers come in. That's where an agent comes in. Let me say this really quick. I think that there is a misrepresentation of NIL agents in the public. Okay. And I've told this story a million times, but I bring it up because listen, if you're an elite college athlete, if you're Caleb Williams at USC, if you're Bryce Young at Alabama, if you're Cooper Flagg at Duke this year, you obviously have great representation. Okay. But the counter to that, there's a lot of guys that have a lot of agents that don't have a lot of experience. I've told this story before. A few years ago at the Final Four, I was basically, somebody asked me, hey, can you sit in on a phone call? You know, it's an NIL deal. We just kind of want your perspective on it. I said, okay, cool. So I sit down on the call, listen to the whole deal, whatever. Agent is on the phone with the company, this and that. I bring it up because talk to the agent after, hey, happy to help, this and that. And I said to him, I said, hey, we're throwing a little party at the, on whatever day. You should swing down if you want to. Would love to meet you in person, blah, 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 blah. I bring it up because this agent literally says to me, he goes, I'd love to, but I'm not 21. Like, I can't get into the bar. And what I realized, this kid was like 19 years old. He was a hustler. Credit to him. But that is who these schools and these collectives are dealing with. So it's not just the schools, but sometimes it's the agents as well not having experience. Don't negotiate something if you can't get it in writing. By the way, to all the parents, I'm sorry, no disrespect to all the hustlers that are 19, 20, 21 years old. Get yourself a real lawyer. Just look over the contract. If you want to take the word of a coach, that's fine. But just get an adult to look over the contract. Lastly, let me say this. I don't want to be too negative about this because at the end of the day, listen, I think there's a lot of negativity in college sports right now about where we are and where we're going. And what I would say is this is year 3 of NIL. It looks a lot different than even year 2. It looks a lot different than even year 1. And it's going to look a lot different 3 years from now than it does now. Remember, we obviously have the house case coming, which basically means the schools can pay players themselves. And so to me, that is a variable. That is an X factor. The truth of the matter is you're not going to have these crazy collectives and who's actually running it and where's the money coming from. You are going to be able to do things directly with the school. I think it's going to put a lot of stress on the schools, but I think it will help kind of put things above board. And I know that there's a lot of negativity, but I think we are getting to a place now where this is actually something, it's going in the right direction. And I've said it a million times, but in October, I actually spoke at an NIL panel in Vegas. My buddy Ryan Silver, AAU extraordinaire, runs a bunch of businesses out here in California. He put on an amazing NIL event. And the thing that I took away from that, there were a lot of lawyers there, a lot of collective people, a lot of ADs. And they all said, look, we're not where we need to be, but it's not, it's going in the right direction. We're going to get it figured out. We are still in the infant stages of the NIL era. So I'm not saying if you're one of those 6 Florida State players that you feel good that you got gypped allegedly out of $250,000, but I think we are getting to a better place where things are a little bit more regulated. It took some time. It is going to take more time, but we are getting to the right place.